Hi everyone, this is Pytalski, Associate Editor with the Daily Yonder. Today I'm joined by Billy Altom, the Executive Director of APRIL, Association of Programs for Rural Independent Living. Billy, paraplegic himself, talks about the mission and the importance of independent living centers, what it means to represent your community, and what unique challenges were brought about by the pandemic.
Our main goal with Centers for Independent Living is to ensure that people with disabilities are contributing members of society in their community. And each Center for Independent Living is unique in a sense because they reflect the community. One of the things that I love about independent living and independent living centers in particular is that they are ran by and for people with disabilities. So 51% of the board of directors is going to be people with disabilities. 51% of the decision-making staff is going to be people with disabilities. So it's the peer-driven mechanism that makes independent living work, because it's, it's those old adages that goes, well, who knows more about what a person with a disability needs than a person with a disability?
So could you describe for me just a couple areas in which centers help provide that information, provide that education for folks?
Yes, we do a lot of we call them independent living skills trainings, one of the services that are provided by Center for Independent Living. And those could be anything. We work with young people. We have no age limit. For us, it's birth to dirt is how we look at things. If you're in between those, you can work with us. So if you're working with folks from that broad of an age group, you're going to have a lot of different types of services, and you're going to be unique to your community, which is what I was alluding to a few moments earlier, is that if you are community-based, you're going to reflect what your community looks like. So some of the things that could happen, maybe job readiness skills, could be for folks who are looking to move out for their first time ever to live on their own. Well, things that a lot of us take for granted. If you've never paid rent, you've never had to do a budget, you don't know, if you're going to rely on a Social Security check, it comes in on the first or the third of the month. You need to be able to stretch that check all the way through the month and know how to do that. I need to get to the grocery store. How do I line up my transportation? How do I get there? Because that's another big thing that a lot of Centers for Independent Living do, is advocate on behalf of getting folks around where they need to be. We talk a lot about transportation within my world, especially in rural America. How do you get where you need to be when you need to be there? And we have a lot of folks in rural America that are transit dependent. Even though you own a car, if you rely on someone to drive you, you're still transit dependent. So we have a lot of folks in rural America that car is king. They may have a car, but they're still transit dependent. So we have to look at, how do we align up folks who can be volunteer drivers? How do you do things? How do we work with other organizations to ensure that those folks aren't at home hungry, without power, those types of things. So independent living is such a broad umbrella of things that we do, that it's almost hard to just really go, well, here's what we do, because we do anything it takes to make sure that a person with a disability is independent. Right? And right now that means with a lot of us as folks who work out in the field, with the virus going on, we may not be able to go see folks face to face. So what a lot of centers have been trying to do in rural America is utilize technology, getting folks iPads so that they can converse back and forth, working with other organizations. I encourage a lot of folks to reach out to their area agencies on aging, and the delivering the Meals on Wheels programs, going, hey, can you at least do a wellness check on some of our folks that you may be driving right by?
And you touched on it a little bit when you talked about transportation, but I wanted to ask if you could expand on unique needs that folks living in rural areas, folks with disabilities living in rural areas might have. Transportation is one. I imagine broadband is a big thing, especially now since a lot of services are transitioning online. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Now that COVID has raised its head, we're starting to realize that we really need that broadband in rural areas, and folks are enjoying it. People are trying to work from home, so we have those issues. But I know here in Arkansas, where we're located, our state recently received a grant and are expanding our broadband area, because not only is this going to be now for people with disabilities that are living at home, kids are trying to go to school, and a lot of them, I know we're doing part of the kids are in school on one day, out one day, playing to schools, in one day, in one day. So you're doing a lot of homeschooling, and you're going to rely on that broadband or wireless internet, whatever moniker you want to put on it, but folks have to be connected in order to be successful, and particularly with kids.
Could you talk a little bit about sort of creative solutions to the problems that the pandemic brought about that you've encountered since all of this started?
We try to be as creative as possible in finding solutions, because what works for one person doesn't always work for another person. You and I right now are having a conversation. As a person who's deaf, unless we have an interpreter or closed captioning, this would not be accessible to them. So we're always looking at ways, how do we ensure that we're accessible to everyone? And that takes a lot of time and energy and effort, but it is absolutely worth it to get the input of everybody, because we all have a voice in this world and we need to use our voice, but sometimes those voices are silenced through lack of access. And particularly with my friends who are deaf and hard of hearing, because a lot of times things are broadcast on TV that do not have interpreters. But some of the other unique opportunities that happen is to work with folks that you may not traditionally work with. And I kind of like to pride myself on that. Is something that I like to do, is work with folks that traditionally don't work with people with disabilities. Also something that I think has been unique is that we're all having to do some telework now to a degree. We've been working with a lot of our membership on how do you telework, what makes this work, and how can you be successful. So we've been doing it. We're seeing it work. Now, even in the general population, because people with disabilities used to apply for jobs and go, hey, I just don't have the transportation to get back and forth to work. Could I telework? We don't do that. Well, now everybody does it. So you're going, well, So either we couldn't do it before or we didn't want to do it before. So I'm going to go with the latter and say, no, we didn't want to do it before. But now that we see that it works, I think we're going to see a lot of changes in how employment opportunities arise for folks with disabilities, in particular, folks who may have transportation limitations of going. Just because I couldn't get there physically to the office doesn't mean that I couldn't have been the most valuable employee you've ever hired. I like to make sure that folks with disabilities have the opportunity to live independently and just be who they are. Not everyone has to be an advocate. We all are, whether we know it or not, but not everyone has to be the leader. I find that some of my best advocacy work has been just by me being out in the public, just by being me. I will have people come up and go, oh, hey, man, you mind if I was getting gas not too long ago. And a gentleman comes up and says, I know this is weird. He goes, but do you mind if I watch you get gas and get in and out of your car? And I went, oh, no, that's perfectly fine. He goes, well, thank you. He goes, my son has just been in an accident. He's in the hospital right now. He's in Little Rock visiting his son who has a spinal cord injury. He goes, we don't know what's going to happen. He goes, and you're the first person I've seen. He went, I can't wait to get back and tell him that it's not as bad as we think it's going to be. That I just saw somebody driving a car, getting in and out of that car, pumping his own gas, acting like nothing had ever happened. So those types of scenarios have such a huge impact on people, because a lot of times when you're new to your disability, you do think that, it's going to be a tough road to hoe. We want to see folks, in particular people with disabilities, living their fullest lives and being productive members of the community.